Hello, I'm 5008 Creations, and this is the icon for my channel, NCTC 5008. It is an SC44 Charger locomotive. Looking at the rest of NCTD Coaster's locomotives, they are all SC44s. Let's take a look over to Pacific Surfliner. Won't you look at that, a full roster of SC44s. How about Amtrak San Joaquin to Capital Corridor? Wow, more SC44s? Going north, more SC44s. Taking a trip over to Florida? Wow, a modified Charger model for Brightline. Take a trip over to the Northeast, a precursor to the SC44 known as the ACS64. How about the long distance? Oh, ALC42s, a modified Charger. How about other commuter rail? Huh. Well, ain't that something? If that opening wasn't an indicator, Siemens is currently dominating the U.S. rail industry, and I thought, why not take a look at how we got here and how Siemens nailed the recipe for an American rail success. Siemens started off way back in the 1800s, founded by, apologies for my garbage pronunciation, Werner von Siemens and Johann Georg Halkse. On October 1st, 1847, their first invention for the company was being based on a typewriter using a needle to point the sequence of letters instead of using Morse code. The company called, Telegraphen Ballunsalv von Siemens and Halkse opened its first workshop on October 12, 1847. Going forward, the company mainly did telegraph-related things across Europe, and in the late 1800s started doing a lot of general tech stuff. During World War I, the company made various airplanes for the war. After World War II, S&H started making various electronics for the masses. At this point, Siemens was divided into various parts. So in 1966, Siemens and Halkse, I'm not even going to try and pronounce that one, and Siemens Ranger Werke merged to form Siemens AG. At this point, Siemens was rapidly growing, via acquiring a bunch of smaller companies, and rail eventually became part of this gigantic company. Siemens made various rail vehicles and rolling stock, such as U2 light rail vehicles for the brand new San Diego trolley, C651 electric trains for Singapore's mass transit system in Australia, and train sets for Germany's Intercity Express (ICE) high-speed rail system, among many other things. However, for American heavy rail, their first major venture was allowing Amtrak to test an ICE-1 train set for high-speed rail in America. This would eventually evolve into the U.S.A. Express train sets made by Alstom, because Siemens unfortunately didn't win the bid for making the train sets. After this, Siemens stayed out of American heavy rail. However, for light rail, they were a major player, providing things like the Siemens S70 and S700s for, once again, the MTS trolley and a bunch of other systems across the US. However, they did do a few heavy rail projects, such as providing Siemens to Zero train sets for NCTD's Sprinter. However, this would all change in the 2010s. Amtrak's Northeast Corridor mainly ran on a fleet of old AM7 locomotives and problematic HHP8 locomotives. They decided to ask Siemens for a locomotive based off the Siemens Eurosprinter train model, and additional measures were made to meet American crashworthiness standards. These all culminated into the Siemens City Sprinter locomotive, more commonly known as the Siemens ACS64. ACS64 stands for Amtrak City Sprinter 6400 kilowatts. Which is roughly 8,600 horsepower, so technically these could have been called the ACS-86, but that's besides the point. They have a maximum speed of 135 miles per hour, but can only run 125 in service. Amtrak placed an order for 70 ACS-64s, and this fully replaced their fleet of AM7s and HHP-8s, with the ACS-64s going in service in 2014. The HHP-8s quietly retired in 2014, and the AM7s triumphantly retired in 2016. Amtrak liked the City Sprinter and thought that a model like this from Siemens for their corridor routes could work rather well, so they went back to Siemens. They pretty much wanted a modern new locomotive that could reach high speeds, meet the EPA's most stringent Tier 4 emission standards, and, in general, just be a good locomotive for these corridor routes. This locomotive would be based off the Siemens Vectron diesel and electric model for Europe. So eventually, in early 2016, the brand new Siemens Charger locomotive was unveiled. It was a SC44 model for Amtrak Midwest. And Amtrak wasted no time in putting these models into service on various corridors across the country. The Siemens Charger reached a top speed of 125 miles an hour and managed to meet the EPA's Tier 4 emission standards. The Charger first entered service on Amtrak Midwest, then on the Amtrak Cascades, Amtrak's Capital Corridor, and Amtrak San Joaquin's, along with Amtrak's Surfliner service. After this, Amtrak basically fell in love with this new model. It was quiet, fast, and performed right up to the standards of the locomotives it replaced, with the only real issue being in cold weather. The locomotives would have some issues, but that only posed an issue on the Cascades and the Midwest. On the Surfliner and in Northern California, they worked pretty well. And other companies and organizations were also eyeing up these locomotives as well. Newly formed private rail operator Brightline bought a modified version of the Charger known as the SCB40, with a brand new coach car known as the Siemens Venture. These were put together on a train set with 2 SCB40s and 4 Venture coaches. The SCB40s were pretty much the same as the SC44s, but just with less horsepower because there were going to be 2 locomotives anyway, so having them on the same train already makes 8,000 horsepower, which is more than enough. The Charger also caught the eye of NCTD, MARC, ACE, and Via Rail, along with a few others, with all buying either SC44s or modified versions. The Venture passenger coach, originally built for Brightline, also caught Amtrak's eye, and Amtrak placed an order for some Amtrak Midwest and Amtrak San Joaquin's Ventures. Amtrak also decided that they liked the Charger so much that they should order a modified version of the Charger for Amtrak long distance service to replace their aging P42 locomotives. These would be the usual Charger, just with a larger fuel tank and 4,200 horsepower to put less strain on the engine over long distances. These would come out to be the ALC-42. These were tested and put into service onto the Empire Builder in early 2021. However, that weather problem began to pose more of an issue now. Due to massive vents on the side of the Charger, it was easier for the cold air to get in and freeze the engine. So Amtrak went right to Siemens and basically said, "Hey bro, can you fix this?" And Siemens said, "Sure." Essentially what happened, to my knowledge, is Amtrak and Siemens started working together on how the hell they would fix this massive issue with freezing, especially with the Empire Builder running in areas that could easily reach below zero in winter. Now, I don't know if they have entirely fixed it yet, but from what I can infer, they looked at it and fixed it with newer models. As I've noticed, the ruckus about the Charger's freezing has gone down as more ALC-42s has come out, meaning that most likely newer ALC-42s have this problem fixed. Where the cutoff line is, I don't know, but this problem is probably fixed now. But anyway, after the whole ALC-42 problems went by, Amtrak started looking for a replacement for their ancient Amfleet 1 passenger cars, which, while they were reliable, they were built almost 50 years ago at this point, and even if they were reliable, that doesn't mean that they can stay forever. So Amtrak looked at the Venture, which proved rather well on Amtrak's Midwest despite there being an issue with the cafe cars delaying them, and decided to place a massive order of new Amtrak train sets known as Amtrak Aero. These would have Venture cars and cab cars to replace Amfleet's and Metroliner cab cars on multiple routes in the Northeast. And these would also replace old Horizon cars, which already served as a temporary replacement for the old Talco Series 1 cars that were deemed unsafe due to the DuPont Washington crash in 2017 on the Amtrak Cascades. This would lead to a partial revitalization of Amtrak's old passenger coach fleet, and would give Amtrak a modern look in many areas. From this, it is obvious to tell how Siemens went from just another company Amtrak would get rolling stock from, to Amtrak's frickin' middle school level crush, and the manufacturer for modern and usually reliable rail rolling stock in America. But Siemens didn't just dabble with conventional rail either. California High-Speed Rail and Brightline are two projects Siemens is obviously dying to get the bid for, and they literally made an entire high-speed train set intensively shooting hints at Brightline that also just so happened to have a top speed of 220 miles an hour that just so coincidentally is California High-Speed Rail's top speed. Yeah, so subtle there, Siemens. And Alstom, the closest Siemens has to a competitor right now, threw a 3-year-old level temper tantrum in disguise as a formal PDF essentially telling Brightline how they should get the bid, because if they did, their mom would buy them this really cool thing called a reliable high-speed train set for Christmas, and they just had to see what this was like. But all jokes aside, Siemens has a very high chance of getting the bid for both of these projects when both of their rolling stock is due at the end of the decade to start service. And Alstom, no matter how much they whine and cry, will most likely have to try and deal with the mess the Avalia Liberty is for not just Amtrak, but also SNCF all over France with their model. And this is not to mention how Siemens has maintained a strong grip on the US light rail market since the San Diego trolley began back in 1981. And chances are, if you are riding in a light rail in the US nowadays, it is almost certainly made by Siemens. Also, not to mention how some railroad crossings are literally made by Siemens. In general, Siemens has essentially pulled off making a bunch of successful models for the US rail market, with the Charger looking to be the new F40 with how much it is spreading. And chances are, in about 10 to 15 years, I wouldn't be surprised if the railfan community in the US goes from basically worshipping to the F40 to worshipping the Chargers, as newer generations come in and see these things literally everywhere. Just like the F40s were and still kind of are, or at least for as long as Metro wants to be as stubborn as hell and refuse to buy anything but EMD prime movers, which stopped existing years ago. And chances are, Siemens is here to stay, as it appears they have made a successful passenger car fit for intercity rail with its modern amenities and great interiors, and a locomotive series that is fast, modern, and should be reliable from now on. And with Amtrak looking for new bi-level cars, which, let's be honest, they will either choose Siemens or Alstom for that project, Siemens will not be going anywhere anytime soon. So with all that being said, it's time to end off this video. This is a good little look at the story of how Siemens pretty much became the face of American passenger rail. Because let's be honest, cut to about 10 years from now, Siemens will basically be everywhere. So without further ado, I was 5008 Creations, you were the viewer, and I'll see you in the future. Goodbye.